Tragedy in Berlin. Pope Francis reacts to what investigators are now calling an act of terrorism. Plus, the Vatican increases security following the attack. Murder in Turkey. Investigators are hunting for clues after the Russian ambassador is killed in Ankara. Christmas crash. We'll show you the shrine in Italy where the first nativity scene was created nearly 800 years ago. And praying on the sidelines. Did this chaplain's prayers help Army beat Navy this year? On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, December 20th, 2016.
Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to our viewers here in the United States and from around the world. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The Islamic State is claiming responsibility for a truck attack on a crowded Christmas market in Germany. This comes as German security forces hunt for the perpetrator. The attack left 12 dead and nearly 50 injured.
Holiday shoppers browsing for gifts became human targets when, shortly after 8 p.m. local time, this truck became a weapon. Berlin police say the crash was no accident and believe it was an act of terrorism. Witnesses say the truck was traveling at a high rate of speed.
As we were leaving, the large truck came through. It went just past me, past my girlfriend. I think it missed me by 3 meters, missed her by 5. It came in through the entrance, hit the sides of the barriers, and then carried on past us.
A man arrested after the truck attack has been released, according to German prosecutors. A second man, a Polish citizen, was found dead in the truck. He was not at the wheel. German Chancellor Angela Merkel visited the scene today. Earlier in the day, Merkel said it would be particularly sickening if it turns out the attacker was a refugee seeking asylum in Germany. This incident is drawing comparisons to a similar attack in Nice, France in July, when a truck drove through a crowd, killing 86 and injuring more than 200. Terrorist groups such as ISIS have called on their followers to carry out such attacks.
German authorities also identify Christmas markets as a potential target. And following the attack in Germany, Italy is beefing up security, especially in areas like St. Peter's Square, where crowds are expected for Christmas ceremonies. EWTN News Nightly producer Mary Shevlin joins us from Rome. Mary, how is security in and around the Vatican today?
Right, it was significantly higher than I would say than in the past few days that we've had. We've even had police cars driving around us at the moment. I went around and spoke with some of the law enforcement officials present outside of the square today, just asking them personally if they had been on heightened alert after the attacks in Germany and in Turkey, and in fact, they are. The Interior Ministry had a special meeting today, how to better protect Rome during the holiday season. Of course, they're beefing up their presence in shopping malls, and of course Rome has its own Christmas markets, but also the metros and places of worship around the city. So you see the increased presence, but there is a sense of calm as well and a sense of security.
As the Holy Father prepares for a busy Christmas schedule, how does the Vatican protect him and pilgrims?
Well, remember why they've been doing this for the past year, let's say, since the attacks in Paris in 2015, last November of 2015, and throughout the Jubilee year. So Rome has been on a high state of alert for the past year. And so we have the Gendarmeria, we have the local Italian police force, we have military presence outside of the Vatican as well with their armored vehicles. There are metal detectors before you get into the Basilica. There are Secret Service in plain clothes walking throughout St. Peter's Square and in the Basilica to keep the Holy Father safe, but the pilgrims as well and all well-wishers. The street leading up to St. Peter's Basilica is still just for foot traffic. That has remained closed to car traffic during the Jubilee. We thought it would open, and it has remained closed, and we expect it will remain closed for a while, especially after the attacks in Germany.
Well, Mary, as you know, Italy has seen a massive influx of refugees from the Middle East. How is the country reacting to the Berlin attack?
Everyone's in shock, of course, but the thing is, they realize that ISIS is losing their stronghold in places like Syria and Iraq, and so there is fear here that they're coming across the borders maybe to carry out their attacks here as they lose footing in the Middle East. But as we know, there are also extremists, people who are extremists or sympathizers that can attack the country from within that are already here. So Italians are on alert, and nobody's anti-immigrant at the moment, but that probably will come up in the political debates as Italy continues to go through this political transition.
Okay, Mary, we'll note that everyone here in our D.C. office is praying for you guys and y'all's safety in our Rome office. Mary Shevlin from EWTN News Nightly, our Rome correspondent, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you.
Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. 4 policemen are killed in Jordan, in the same province where 10 people were shot dead in a series of ambushes earlier this week. The clash took place in the Karak province of central Jordan. Jordan is facing problems with homegrown extremism. Hundreds of Jordanians are fighting alongside other militants in Iraq and Syria. The shootings are the bloodiest in Jordan in recent memory and raise new concerns about the rise of Islamic militancy in the pro-Western country. The body of the assassinated Russian ambassador to Turkey is being flown home to Russia today. A ceremony for Andrei Karlov was held at the Ankara airport. Karlov was shot dead on Monday evening at an art gallery. The 22-year-old gunman shouted slogans about the embattled Syrian city of Aleppo as he killed the envoy. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the killing of the Russian ambassador was a provocation aimed at derailing Russian-Turkey ties and the peace process in Syria. A Turkish official says it's unlikely the gunman acted alone. Investigators from both countries are hunting for clues. Evacuations continue in Aleppo before the government resumes full control of the city. Syrian activists say only around 3,000 people are left in eastern Aleppo. Meanwhile, in the western part of Aleppo, a bomb exploded at a Christmas tree lighting event. No one was injured. A top Roman Catholic leader in the Holy Land is condemning the destruction in Syria. Father Pier Battista Pizzaballa calls the civil war a tragedy.
The images of Aleppo are in front of all of us, and they're shocking.
Pizzaballa also said he hopes the attack in Jordan is an isolated event. He took office earlier this year as the chief clergyman to the local Catholic population in Israel. Pizzaballa's main task is promoting dialogue among Christians in the Holy Land and between Christians and other religious groups. Joining us now is Blaise Mishtal, the director of the National Security Program at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Blaise, the gunman in Turkey made a comment about Aleppo, about Syria, and saying especially don't forget Aleppo. Can you explain the connection between Russia, Syria, Turkey?
Sure. Well, it's a complicated one that goes back many, many years, but you've seen Turkey emerge as one of the main critics of what's been going on in Syria, and now it's moving closer back again to Syria and Russia. And what you've seen is a protest by many Turks who are Sunnis, who feel that the plight of Sunnis in Syria, who in Aleppo have been being bombarded ruthlessly by Syrian, Iranian, and Russian forces, and are rebelling both against the Turkish government for condoning Russian action and also against Russia for perpetrating what they see as a massive crime against humanity.
Is there a connection then to the violence in Syria and now what we've seen in Turkey and the Berlin attack that we just saw?
I think only insofar as chaos knows no borders and respects no boundaries. What we saw in Berlin, I believe, is being associated with ISIS. What we saw in Turkey is not really associated with ISIS, but it both come from Syria. And what we see is if you let the violence rage, if you let people's lives be consumed and wasted, that anger spills out and causes violent acts throughout the world.
France has had several horrible attacks, especially the one in Nice earlier this year, and now again, like we mentioned, the Berlin attacks. Do you think Europe is prepared for all of these sort of isolated incidents?
I think they're growing prepared. I think for a long time they thought it was a problem that wasn't going to come to their shores. It was a problem for the Middle East. It was a problem for America. Even when you saw attacks in 2005, 2007, they didn't really think it was going to be a large-term problem. Now with the influx of refugees and with Europe taking a role in the ISIS conflict, they're going to have to really put in place a lot of the same measures that the U.S. put in place after 9/11 in terms of homeland security and intelligence.
How big of a problem do you think the immigration refugee crisis has been for them?
It's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, the more it is a problem and we don't know who has come in fully, but the more they tamp down on the refugees, the more they isolate them, the more they alienate them, the more alienation they're going to build within their own societies, and the more people are going to rise up against them. So it's a very hard balance to strike between making sure they're secure and screening their populations, but not oppressing and alienating them either.
Yeah, tough situation for sure. Blaise Mishtal, the director of the National Security Program at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you, Wyatt.
Pope Francis frees a Vatican Monsignor convicted of leaking confidential documents to journalists. Earlier this year, the Vatican court convicted Monsignor Lucio Vallejo Balda of conspiring to pass documents onto the journalist and sentenced him to 18 months in prison. He was fired from his job as a high-ranking Vatican financial official. Vallejo now falls under the authority of his local bishop in Astorga, Spain. And the Vatican says it is saddened that the ordination of 2 Chinese bishops, consecrated with the approval of both China and the Holy See, was marred by the presence of an illegitimate bishop, one ordained without the Pope's consent. The dispute over naming bishops is the biggest stumbling block preventing the reestablishment of diplomatic relations between China and the Vatican. President-elect Donald Trump fires back at former President Bill Clinton on Twitter. Clinton told a weekly newspaper earlier this month that Trump doesn't know much. Clinton also claimed the president-elect called him after his victory. Trump took to Twitter saying Bill Clinton stated that I called him after the election. Wrong. He called me with a very nice congratulations. He doesn't know much. The former president replied saying, here's one thing Donald Trump and I can agree on. I called him after the election. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell rejects calls for a special Senate investigation into possible interference by Russia into the U.S. presidential election. McConnell says while the hack is a serious issue, it doesn't need a select committee. The Republican says the Senate Intelligence Committee is able to investigate the issue. A federal court releases redacted copies of the search warrant that gave the FBI permission to take a second look at Hillary Clinton's emails. Among the documents unsealed was an FBI affidavit arguing there was a probable cause to look at emails on former Representative Anthony Weiner's computer. The mayor of Washington, D.C. signs a bill to allow terminally ill patients to end their lives with the help of a doctor. The so-called Death with Dignity bill was passed by D.C. Council last month. The bill now heads to Congress for approval. More charges announced in the Flint water crisis. 2 former appointed emergency managers are charged with 4 crimes, including conspiracy for their role in the tainted water in Flint. Michigan's Attorney General said the 2 men committed Flint to $85 million in bonds to help build a new water pipeline while using a plant that was not equipped to treat water. 2 other employees are also charged.
Coming up, a new report on abortion clinics around the country. The authors paint a grim picture, plus the program helping to adapt toys for children with disabilities.
A major new investigation of American abortion clinics reveals death, filth, and incompetence. The reports claim to find a pattern of abuse, keeping profits high and standards low. Americans United for Life looked at the abortion providers across the country. Jason Calvi reports.
Jennifer Morabelli died after a botched abortion. Amniotic fluid from her womb spilled into her bloodstream, making her blood unable to clot. One of the low points in a new report by Americans United for Life. The group gathered evidence from hundreds of clinics in 32 states. Another finding, dangerous, dirty clinics. In one case in Virginia, a staff member assisted in an abortion after unclogging a toilet, but before changing scrubs or properly cleaning her hands. The report also describes doctors who are unqualified. For example, James Pendergraft has had his Florida medical license suspended 4 times. And the study says things may get worse because of a landmark Supreme Court case this year. It struck down a Texas law that required abortion clinics meet the same standards as other outpatient surgical centers. The law also mandated abortion doctors have admitting privileges at local hospitals. It was a big win for abortion supporters back in June.
It's a totally unnecessary requirement, and it's obviously a very political requirement.
Pro-lifers say no matter where you stand on the life issue, these laws make sense.
This ought to be the common ground between pro-choice, pro-life women's efforts. There is no sense to the idea that if you were concerned about women's health at all, that you would object to basic health standards.
And Americans United for Life says the report shows that need for basic health standards in abortion clinics across the country.
And the researchers poured through state health inspection reports, medical license revocations, court documents, and news reports, all to put this study together.
Jason, where can people learn more?
Well, it's very easy. You can read the report online at unsafereport.org. And there you can also sign a petition urging lawmakers to pass laws improving abortion clinic safety standards and to improve state oversight of those abortion clinics.
Thanks, Jason. That website again, unsafereport.org. Joining us now is Deanna Wallace, staff counsel for Americans United for Life, who released the report. Deanna, you laid out hundreds of examples, unsafe, unsanitary conditions. Wasn't Roe versus Wade supposed to make sure this didn't happen?
Absolutely. There used to be this concept of safe, legal, and rare. But with 1.2 million abortions every year, we can say it's definitely not rare. And now with this report, we have evidence, plenty of evidence to say it's also not safe. That's all that's left is legal.
So Jason Cowley mentioned his report how the Supreme Court had basically struck down a Texas abortion clinic, a safety law. Do you think that sets a precedent?
Well, one of the things that was said in Hellerstedt this summer was that there wasn't enough evidence to show that this regulation was necessary. But now we have a body of evidence, 227 clinics, 32 states, over 1,400 health and safety violations. So we believe that this will give states the evidence that they need in order to show that safety regulations are necessary.
So then let's talk a little more strategy on that. How do you suggest states go about pushing for more of those safety standards?
Well, definitely we have state-by-state analysis of the different clinics and the violations that they're guilty of, including a lot of repeat offenders who were cited multiple times for the same violation. So we want to be able to give this to states, and we're asking for people to go on our website, unsafereport.org, and sign a petition calling for their lawmakers and elected officials to actually pass this legislation and enforce legislation that will hold these clinics accountable for the harm that they do.
And like you say, there are hundreds of providers facing investigations or some form of citations. So there are some regulations in some states. Is this really a problem of enforcement, or does the states just need more stricter standards?
Certainly enforcement is one of the problems. Something we saw in Pennsylvania with Kermit Gosnell was that clinic regulations were not being enforced, allowing him for years to maim and kill women and their born children. But in other states, such as California, there are no regulations at all. So not only do we need to pass the regulations in states where we don't have them, but we need to make sure that states that do have these regulations are enforcing them properly.
Really quickly, what was the most shocking thing you found in investigating this?
For me, it was the story of a 13-year-old girl who was passed along in a car trail from one state to another state. And while she was in extreme pain from a botched abortion, her mother begged the abortion providers to call an ambulance, and she was denied that. They then put her in another car and took her finally to a hospital where she had to spend 6 days recovering from all of the harm that they did to her.
It's sad, it's scary, all of these stories that we hear about it and the things you guys lay out in this report, but obviously it's necessary that we bring it to light. Deanna Wallace, staff counsel for Americans United for Life, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
A team of college students in Florida has set their sights on helping kids with disabilities. With Christmas fast approaching, they've been working on creating custom-made toys just for them.
Good job.
4-year-old Scarlett Wilkus has cerebral palsy. She has trouble opening her hands and needs help getting around.
The toys at Walmart or Target, they're pretty much non-existent. She can't play with typical toys.
But this year, Scarlett got a toy car adapted for her, thanks to a program at the University of North Florida. Engineering and physical therapy students work together, converting drivable toy cars for children with disabilities.
When the 3 guys showed up and they informed me it was Go-Go Power Wheels that they were going to custom build, it definitely brought tears to our eyes because my husband had been trying to figure out how to do that for a year.
The Adaptive Toy Program, now in its 3rd year, received a 5-year grant from the National Institutes of Health. The UNF program is one of dozens of related toy car programs for children with disabilities, but it's the only one that involves students customizing the cars for free. The students in return get more than class credit.
I can't even describe how the feeling is. The first time we met the mother, she actually cried, and it just made me want to work harder.
Scarlett recently got to test out her new ride.
She's going to be able to get out a little bit more and not be so trapped by a wheelchair. So that'll be nice to see. And for us, it'll be nice to actually see her interact with normal children.
Each customized car is worth over $1,000. The school has given out 18 so far. allowing kids like Scarlett to continue important therapies through play. Up next, this priest became famous after he got on his knees at the Army-Navy game. We catch up with the West Point chaplain, and the Italian town where the nativity tradition began, and the saint who created the first Christmas creche. If you've been on social media since the Army-Navy football game on December 10th, you may have seen our next guest. While many fans were in the stands rooting for their team, West Point's chaplain got on his knees to pray. Father Matthew Polakowski spent about 10 minutes on the sidelines with rosary beads in hand. During that time, Army took the lead and then ended up winning their first game against Navy since 2001. Joining us now via Skype is Chaplain Colonel Matthew Polakowski, the chaplain at West Point. Father Matthew, we saw you praying on the sidelines. Can we just assume it's thanks to your prayers Army won?
Well, I wouldn't say it's thanks to my prayers, but let's just say that prayer definitely helped.
What exactly do you pray for during the game?
I always pray for both teams for no serious injury during the game, and I pray for all of the players for their personal holiness and salvation. And then I pray for Army's victory every single time.
Of course. Well, let's talk about your role then at West Point. As a Catholic priest, how do you minister to a flock made up of different religions, different denominations?
You know, the United States guarantees the freedom of religion for all of our citizens, and so that's the basis of the chaplaincy. And so all chaplains either perform the specific religious rites of their own denomination, or we provide them for soldiers. So I take care of Catholic needs for Catholic soldiers. But if I had a Jewish or Muslim soldier that had a specific religious need, I would either contact a chaplain of that faith, or if there's no chaplain of that faith available, I would find a local person to meet that person's religious needs. And so that's what we do. We guarantee people's free exercise of religion. It's beautiful, really.
You served in the infantry as a soldier previously. How does that experience help you serve as a chaplain?
Well, you know, every military chaplain is, in fact, a member of the military service. I'm a soldier and a priest. I'm a priest who is a soldier. And so it certainly helps me be present to soldiers. It helps me operate in field environments, combat environments, all experiences that I've had. And that gets me forward to be with the soldiers, which is where I need to be.
What role does faith play in a soldier's life?
That's a great question. I'd like to tell just a quick story. I was over in Afghanistan a few years ago, and there was I asked several people, from privates all the way up to generals, what difference faith made in their life as soldiers. And there was a young man, Trey Moran, who was a football player, Army football player, and he said, he gave the best answer. He said, "Chaplain, when we go outside the wire, it's dangerous, and people are afraid, and if they don't admit it, then they're just lying to themselves. However, when our conscience is clear, our mind is focused, and we can be better soldiers. And when our conscience is not clear, we are distracted, and it puts the mission at jeopardy." So for me, that was the best answer anybody gave: short, succinct, and honest.
It is very interesting to hear about that way of life, and certainly your ministry as well. Chaplain Colonel Matthew Polakowski, the chaplain at West Point, thank you so much for being with us.
Glad to be here. God bless you all.
Pope Francis appoints a new director of the Vatican Museums. Barbara Giada takes up her new job on January 1st. Up until now, the mother of three was second in command at the museums. Vatican Radio reports Giada has a liberal arts degree from the University of Rome. She is the first woman to hold the job. The museums, with paintings by Michelangelo, Raphael, and other Renaissance giants, attract tourists from around the world. Finally tonight, nativity scenes are a hallmark of Christmas, and one Italian town is celebrating where the tradition began. The first Christmas crib was created in Greccio in the year 1223 by St. Francis. A shrine now sits at the location where the patron saint of Italy wanted to reenact the birth of Jesus. That's where the Christmas creche took form.
Qui Francesco ha voluto rivivere.
Father Domenico manages the shrine and says St. Francis wanted to see with his own eyes the humble circumstances Jesus was born into. According to one account, locals gathered around the nativity scene at St. Francis read the gospel nearly 800 years ago. Today, everything in Greccio still speaks of St. Francis, and the town proudly keeps his tradition alive. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll see you back here again tomorrow. Good night, and God bless.